on possible maladaptations in response to low-resolution human-to-human communication, or why I hate WhatsApp. There are many aspects to full human-to-human conversation. First and foremost, the fact that for a conversation to happen, an agreement on time and place has to be made continuously as the conversation revolves. This also can be seen as a constant value statement derived from the one thing we all have, maybe too little of time. We place our priorities where we place our time. In addition, there is the gestic tone of voice, the ability to intercut, to pause, to listen for a while. In short, texting, one could argue, is in total lower resolution human-to-human communication. Think about Twitter and its known maladaptive behaviors it seems to cause. So what if instead of having real conversations, one would make a communication format, short texts with character limits, or at least an average character expectation, also influenced by the choice architecture the user interface of such a service enables. And ta-da! SMS, later chat. Of course, chat, just like Twitter, one might argue, also enables lots of good things, like properly citing sources. In normal conversations, the evaluation of a cited source might be seen as too disruptive for the conversational flow. Let me just fact-check that on my phone real quick, like embedding images, videos, and links. In short, embedding media. To a certain extent, media can also be embedded in real conversation. Look at this image on my phone, on my screen, etc. Think work meeting presentation. But often, real-life conversations might just happen face-to-face, and instead of showing an image, searching for 30 seconds on one's phone for it, one might often find oneself just describing the thing images would have shown or supported. I would say I was a somewhat normal kid. I talked to people, I also read books, at least from the time I was able to on. I used to cold call friends after kindergarten school after lunch every day, convincing them to spend the afternoon with me. I often would have their siblings or parents on the phone first. I also found myself often talking with adults about this and about that, asking them simple questions, what they did, why they did it. The never-ending why question came in handy often. Then some things changed. I don't want to simplify things too much here. Of course, lots of things change all the time, and seldom the impact of one variable stands out so clearly that one can speak of a cause and effect relationship. It might have been puberty. It might have been increasing pressure to perform in various ways. It might have been me being the second smallest kid in late puberty in my class, with everyone, apart from one other girl, outgrowing me. I will never know. With 6 feet, I'm fine now, thanks for asking. But it also might have been the advent of chat. And this is what I want to focus on how chat might have changed, how I, and maybe projecting from my own experience onto the world, as we all might falsely do from time to time, around grade 6, with me being about age 12, and one of the first social networks made its rounds in class. It was green, ceased to exist years ago, and everyone but their mom joined. It was called Lokalisten. It just might have been a crappy Facebook copy, but that didn't prevent me from joining eventually. In grade 6, a few students joined our class, and a few others from grade 5 left, due to subject choices, so there was a little bit of a getting to know phase. As I am writing this, I am questioning to which extent I just am taking this topic as an excuse to indulge nostalgically in the past, taking away time and mental space from the future, as I often do. So before, if I wanted to talk to these new people and possibly befriend them, I had to actually talk to these new people and actually befriend them. But as Lokalisten, I think Skype even before became popular, it opened the door to a new way of communicating. Right whenever you want, without social filters, without the need to get the courage going to talk to people. Only you two will know, and wait for responses as long as you want, effectively, potentially extending the average reaction time from seconds in normal conversation to possibly infinity. Advantageous, one might say, enabling everyone and their dog to respond whenever they saw and still see fit, but also creating a never-ending slot machine based on one of the possibly most addicting things there is, human interaction. The possibility for friendship, to find out something interesting, to learn, to play, to share experiences together. Maybe one day find a partner for creating a family. So I began to chat, and despite earlier attempts to get to know these few people who came new to our class, I chatted with them, introduced my efforts in real life. Out of those maybe 6 to 8 people, I would say, to this day, more than a decade later, I only ever had some actual in-depth conversations with about 2 of these or them. Yesterday I had an idea. What if I just logged out of WhatsApp, changed my status to not on WhatsApp till xxx.xxx.xxxxx, SMS or call me if necessary, thereby cutting off the ability to message anyone, anytime, the expectation to respond with a latency of maybe at max 1 to 3 days, but of course you don't have to. But also, this might be considered rude, going against the grain of what is considered normal chatting behavior. Forcing people to either write an email, force them to send an SMS to me, or actually consider calling me, thereby having to jump over the somewhat decent threshold of "this is so important that I need to tell this person right now." Also enabling emergency messaging, calling. After all, my phone is still a phone. A few days ago, a friend came late, and I was so low resolution language would be not to say something like a word that begins with P, but let's just say I was suboptimally in terms of my state of mind. One could also call it emotionally charged and aggregated. That I lay awake for the entire night, not sleeping a single minute. Ultimately, as usually is the case, this anger turned inwards. Call it individualism, call it maybe taking responsibility. The reason this angered me might have been because it mirrored back my own flaws, back into my own face. Whenever I appear late, I hate it. Not it, but myself for it. I also hate myself for failing to properly select someone who would not come late and disrespect my time and me thereby. I hated it because I hated it. I just couldn't forget about it. Because I had invested some time before, because I had made an effort to appear on time, only to get a message a minute before the agreed time that the person would be late. Without WhatsApp, the person might have just SMS'd me, not saying that this is much better. But what if the person would have no possibility to write me before? What if, just like back in the days, I had to either figure myself out to ask people in kindergarten or school whenever I wanted to meet them this afternoon, or invite them to my birthday party, or call them, which one might argue already removes a lot of the resolution or information transferred in real-life conversation. Of course, it's not as easy as saying technology bad, but by enabling constant never-ending messaging, it changed the choice, at least my choice architecture, of how to approach people. So, if we divide human interaction into 3 distinct buckets, of course just simplifying, then we would have speaking in real life, talking on phone, and sending text. And one could argue, out of all of these 3, speaking in real life is the hardest, then easier is talking on the phone, and even easier is just sending text. Before text, I liked talking to people, at least I think I did. Of course, there were many times when I did not talk to people, usually when they are not standing in front of me. Years later, close to the end of my high school years, I asked a girl I had been into for months at this point to take a quick walk around the schoolyard in the break. While she ate her yogurt, I mentioned that I had been into her. She mentioned the opposite. She had made out with another guy the night before, whereas I chugged glass after glass of alcohol the night before, soothing in my self-pity while I stood on the sidelines in the club. I can vaguely remember puking about 5 to 10 times all over the club, then 2 to 3 times on a 20-kilometer drive home, then feeling like absolute garbage the whole next day. Unable to sleep, unable to stand, unable to walk, I eventually decided to walk into the woods to avoid my family noticing or puking onto various places in our house. Now, what I have to mention here, maybe for the international audience, is that I was able to drink legally and I was not able to drive because, first of all, I wasn't old enough, but also I would have been unable to, probably. As I asked her, probably on the following Monday in school, when she then chatted with me day and night. No, as I asked her, probably on the following Monday in school, why she then had chatted with me day and night for months, asking about the day, often saying good morning, good night, about why she then had chatted with me day and night, she ate her yogurt. I could end here, right here, on a dramatic note, but I think I have to square the circle back first. I had misinterpreted our communication. Apparently, I had for years failed to realize the effects of the new, by the advent of chat, created choice architecture and how it would have affected my choices back then and still now. I had failed to see the obvious, at least retrospectively, that apart from chatting for months, we barely had ever talked before, and even if so, I utterly failed to make any interesting conversation with her. It is mind-boggling to to even think about it right now. I was destroyed, you could call it destroyed, for days, until the general took over. The general. Note. Despite not actually having multiple personalities, I, in the last days, more or less decided I would introduce the concept of different personalities, at least for writing this here, to cluster together similar behavioral patterns displayed and observed, as far as not being influenced too much by observer blindness, in order to simplify thinking. In other words, low resolution requires less mental energy, but more or less obviously also cuts out variables in order to do so, just like chatting does. The general always appears in my life when other versions of myself fail to manage life. One might argue there could be an evolutionary background to this, similar to how the neocortex, our supercomputer, only runs on top of the rest of the brain, and the rest of the brain shuts it down whenever necessary. Sleep now, we need rest. I might say, but not only say it, but actually pull the plug on the supercomputer. Similarly, in my case, it said, "You F idiot." And you might have guessed it, the general still didn't fully disintegrate again after my friend was late a few days ago, and as I'm still writing this. But I kind of trust this guy, the general. He seems to want the best for the both of us, or the many of us. He seems to have access to way more mental resources than me. The one who writes this may be best described as average me. He back then also kept talking to me day and night. Probably because I needed to hear him out. He just appeared. He always appears when really needed. He told me, in less ambassadorly words, to forget about this girl. So I did. Months later, at a party, a friend of hers mentioned to me at a party that she now would maybe potentially be somewhat interested. I told her I wasn't any longer. I already had made a decision, being forced to make a decision. The general had made the decision for me, for shitty, dreamy me that failed to see the obvious. For years now, iterations of how this all went down played back in my mind. Every now and then, maybe whenever the subconscious part of my brain recognized similar patterns, forcing me again into another session of exposure therapy. Imagine the general forcing you to watch a presentation he made. Look, playing it back, carrying me back into every time I make similar mistakes again. It might not be just chatting. This now obviously has multiple meanings, which I buffer to explain here in an effort to make my writing more accessible. In one sense, the conversation with her back then always was just chatting. On my side, it seemingly wasn't. The lack of additional information in this case seems to have opened too many possible interpretations, allowing me to live in a dream world where the both of us could actually not just be chatting. It takes away the time I could have spent actually conversing in real life, actually learning in real life, actually finding out when to time a joke properly, when to ask, when to talk, when to listen. A skill may be more difficult, maybe not, but at least kind of different. It prevented me from maybe properly judging actual social cues. It might have delayed the development of my social skills by days, weeks, months, maybe years. It might have introverted me more and more. It might have made me fail to realize that a friend who, despite this not being too big of a deal for anyone but me, but already had been late 4 out of 5 times before, probably also on this evening would fail to appear on time, making it the 5 out of 5, and made me feel like an absolute idiot waiting for him. I had to feel that. Because if I didn't, I probably once again would have failed to learn from my mistakes. I felt like an absolute idiot standing there waiting. Just like I felt like an absolute idiot when she had finished her yogurt. Rage against the dying of the light.